What if every choice you've ever made was whispered to you centuries before you were born? That question burned in Marisol's mind when she first held the brittle map, a tangle of crimson glyphs that no historian would touch. They said it led to a ruined sanctuary where reality thinned, and only those brave enough to listen could hear the ancient oracles still speaking. She didn't believe in destiny, until the moment her own name shimmered into focus, etched between symbols that danced on the page like living fire. Scholars dismissed divination as superstition, a faded relic of primitive minds. But what if beneath the cracked bones of forgotten rituals lay a truth scholars can't or won't admit? What if runes and star charts, tea leaves and mirrored pools were never meant to predict the future, so much as reveal the patterns already woven into our souls? Marisol never meant to become a pilgrim to the unknown. She studied languages, not legends. She chased manuscripts, not miracles. Yet something in that map stirred her curiosity into obsession. Every clue she uncovered whispered of a power that could bend perception itself, a power powerful enough to reshape history, yet dangerous enough to be buried beneath centuries of silence. Tonight she stands on the brink of that buried secret, not in some moonlit ruin, but in your own mind. Close your eyes and imagine symbols sketched in your dreams, sigils that glow when you finally understand their meaning. Feel the pulse of possibility stirring beneath ordinary moments, a cup of coffee that cracks open a hidden message, say a pattern on the sidewalk that hints at your next move. These aren't coincidences. They're echoes of an ancient language waiting for you to decode. And yet, what if you're not ready? What if some doors once opened can't be closed? Every diviner's tale carries a warning. Seek too eagerly, and the shadows you summon may demand more than you bargained for. Over the next few minutes, we'll trace the trail from those first bone fragments, cast by prehistoric shamans, to the polished, crystal spheres of Renaissance courts. We'll meet dreamers like Marisol who risked everything for a single prophecy. We'll explore how symbols became mirrors, reflecting our deepest fears and desires back at us. By the end, you may question whether the future is fixed or fluid, whether fate is written in the stars or carved into the very fabric of your being. All I can promise is this: once you start listening, you'll never hear the world the same way again. Are you ready to hear what's been whispering through time? How do you read the future in a pile of cracked bones or the sweep of distant stars? Long before our modern calendars, long before quills scratched ink across parchment, the first diviners sat by firelight, rolling fragments of bone across flat stones. They weren't guessing games or parlor tricks. They were life and death rituals. Those shards, often the knuckle bones of sheep or goats, became oracles when tossed in specific patterns. A cluster here meant abundance. A lone fragment there meant warning. Generations later, these same patterns would guide entire communities through drought, famine, even war. Centuries passed, and humans looked up as much as down. In the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia, an elite caste of stargazers tilted bronze instruments toward the night sky. They charted Jupiter's wanderings and Venus's shimmer, convinced that planetary motions echoed the whims of gods and foretold the fate of kings. One of the most astonishing examples played out in Nineveh under King Ashurbanipal's rule, around 664 BCE. According to cuneiform tablets still etched with smudged clay, Ashurbanipal's chief astrologer observed an ominous alignment. The moon eclipsing the sun in a rare cosmic tableau. The omen, if unheeded, prophesied civil unrest and invasion. Rather than dismiss it as superstition, the king acted. He fortified city walls, stockpiled grain, and dispatched messengers to rally loyal governors. When the eclipse arrived, day turning to night in the heart of the empire, Ashurbanipal's forces stood ready. Within weeks, a would-be rebellion collapsed before it could even spark. The eclipse never again came as a simple shadow. It became the sign that saved a civilization. You might think these practices belong to vanished empires, but dimly lit chambers in cultures worldwide held similar rites. In ancient China, priests poured water over heated stones, reading the crack patterns known as oracle bones, to counsel emperors. In the Celtic forests of Europe, druids cast mistletoe-laden sticks into sacred fires, interpreting the sparks that flew skyward. Across oceans, the Maya charted Venus's cycles to time battles, while Pacific Island seers read coconut husk webs at dawn. What did all these disparate societies share? A conviction that the universe communicated through symbols, in the fall of bones, the dance of flames, the motion of planets. Every chance pattern was an invitation to look deeper, to consider that beneath chaos lay an intelligible order. Yet somewhere along the line, these practices were cast aside. As empires fell and new religions rose, divination became heresy in the eyes of the powerful. Bones were burned, star charts were banned, priests found themselves silenced or worse, their instruments smashed in the central square to remind the masses that only sanctioned texts held truth. Knowledge once whispered in candle-lit rooms was buried under dogma, labeled superstition, hidden in clandestine scrolls. Still, the embers smoldered. Secret societies kept the flame alive, scholars copying forbidden texts by lantern light, passing on cryptic manuscripts bound in human skin, or sealed within the vaults of cloistered monasteries. During the Renaissance, a handful of alchemists dusted off star charts and bone divination manuals, convinced that rediscovering these arts would reveal the blueprint of creation itself. In Egypt, astrologers in Pharaoh's courts consulted the rising of Sirius, calculating the Nile's floods. In India, Vedic seers mapped solar returns to guide kings through diplomatic intrigues. Even in our modern world, though few admit it, personalities like Carl Jung borrowed these archetypal symbols to decode the human psyche, suggesting that the same energies that guided ancient rulers still pulse through our collective unconscious. So when you shuffle a deck of tarot cards or peer into a crystal ball today, you're tapping into the same current that once steered the fate of empires. The bones and the stars aren't relics. They're wired into our perception. Every time you notice a pattern in chaos, you're echoing a ritual as old as humanity itself. But why did so many of these methods slip into the shadows? Because knowledge is power, and power fears the unknown. Rulers who once relied on diviners turned on them when they could no longer control their interpretations. Religious authorities branded the arts demonic. Scientific revolutionaries dismissed them as unquantifiable. And so the languages of fate, once spoken fluently by entire societies, were relegated to the fringes, whispered only in hidden lodges and scholarly footnotes. Tonight, as you consider whether age-old rituals hold any merit in your life, remember this. For thousands of years, humans trusted these signs to guide marriages, to avoid plagues, even to predict the rise and fall of nations. They wouldn't have risked their lives on mere superstition. They believed in a cosmic tapestry, woven from bone and stardust, that spoke to those daring enough to listen. In our next chapter, we'll ask a deeper question. Is divination really just a tool to predict events, or is it a mirror reflecting the hidden patterns of our own souls? Stay with us, because the answers will challenge everything you think you know about fate. Have you ever shuffled a deck of cards and felt a jolt? Like the card you pulled was speaking directly to something buried inside you? That spark isn't magic trickery. It's your own mind reaching out through symbols that predate words. When Carl Jung wrote that symbols are the language of the soul, he wasn't offering a quaint metaphor. He was pointing at a hidden highway between our conscious thoughts and the vast territory beneath them. Think of divination tools, tarot cards, runestones, scrying mirrors, not as windows into tomorrow, but as signposts pointing to inner landscapes we haven't yet explored. Imagine you're standing at a crossroads in your life, torn between staying in a stable job or risking everything to follow a passion. You draw 3 cards and suddenly, boom, you pull the Hermit, the Tower, and the Star. At first glance, you might panic. Isolation, upheaval, hope. Are you doomed to loneliness and chaos before you see any light? But what if those cards aren't spells cast by an otherworldly force, but mirrors held up to your own story? Let me tell you about Elena, a writer weighed down by self-doubt. She came to her first tarot reading expecting a neat yes or no answer. Instead, she saw the Hermit, a solitary figure whose lantern reminded her of her grandfather, who taught her to write but cautioned her against risk. Then came the Tower, its blazing spire echoing the corporate skyscraper where she toiled away, stifling her creativity. Finally, the Star winked at her, a reminder of that night she stayed up until dawn, enthralled by her own words on the page. In that moment, Elena realized the cards weren't predicting a line of events, they were telling her story. They reflected her fears, her history, and her hidden potential. The Hermit wasn't doom. It was her need for wise solitude. The Tower wasn't failure. It was the collapse of a life she outgrew. The Star wasn't a distant promise. It was the spark she already carried inside. This is the alchemy of divination. You turn not lead into gold, but ignorance into insight. Like a miner probing the earth, you use these symbols to dig into the soil of your psyche. Each rune, each card, each ripple in a scrying bowl is a clue, an echo of an archetype that pulses through every human heart. The mother, the warrior, the trickster. Jung called these patterns collective unconscious, and they aren't just academic ideas. They're alive in our dreams, our stories, even the shape of our anxieties. Picture a vast library where each book is bound in a different symbol. One might be embossed with a stag, another with a chalice carved in silver. You wander the aisles until one book's symbol calls to you. You open it, and its pages aren't filled with text but with memories. The time you first felt misunderstood, the moment you discovered a hidden talent, the fear you've never spoken aloud. The book doesn't tell you what to do. It shows you what you already know deep down. That's why divination can't be reduced to fortune-telling. It's less a crystal ball projecting future events and more a mirror reflecting your inner world. When you peer into that mirror, you might be startled by what you see. A pattern of self-sabotage, a longing you've ignored, a strength you've forgotten. It's thrilling and a little unsettling to face those truths. No wonder many traditions built protective rituals around readings. A trusted guide, a sacred space, a grounding practice afterward. Because when the mirror cracks open, you need a steady hand to help piece the fragments back together. And here's the catch. The same symbol can whisper different messages to different people. A rune-meaning journey might promise adventure to someone restless, yet warn another against fleeing from responsibility. Context is everything. The question you bring, the feelings you carry, even the time of day. Divination is a dance between you and the symbol, a conversation rather than a decree. Over the centuries, skeptics have dismissed these practices as illusion. Yet modern therapists are quietly weaving tarot and archetypal images into their work, guiding clients toward breakthroughs that logic alone couldn't spark. They don't treat the cards as prophecy. They treat them as catharsis, keys to unlock the doors of perception. Because sometimes, a picture really is worth 1,000 words, especially when those words lie hidden in the dark. So the next time you feel drawn to shuffle or cast, remember this: you're not summoning an external force to dictate your life. You're holding a map, handed down across millennia, that leads straight to the labyrinth of your own heart. Step inside, follow the symbols, and see where they guide you. But be warned, the reflections you find may change everything you thought you knew about yourself. In our next chapter, we'll dive into those very tools: runes scraped from stone, mirrors polished to liquid black, decks of illustrated cards, and discover why each one resonates with a different chord in your inner symphony. Get ready to choose your own oracle and hear which ancient voice speaks most clearly within you. Have you ever held a handful of smooth stones and felt a curious spark, as if they were humming with secrets you couldn't yet name? Or watched your reflection warp in an obsidian mirror and wondered whose image stared back at you, your own or something older. Maybe you've shuffled a deck of cards and caught your breath when one slipped free, as if it leapt into your hand on purpose. These three tools, runestones, scrying mirrors, tarot decks, might seem wildly different on the surface. One is carved from granite and bone, another polished glass that swallows light. The third a stack of illustrated cards born in Renaissance Europe. But each shares a single purpose, to lodge a symbol into your mind so powerful that it pries open hidden doors in your psyche. Runes sing in the clatter of stones. Legend says the Norse god Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil's branches for 9 nights, plucking the first runes from the well of Urd. When you cast those ancient symbols, etched with angular lines that look as if they were hewn by fire, you're tapping into a system older than the Latin alphabet. I met Freya, a graphic designer in Reykjavik, who swears she heard answers in the click of her runes 3 winters ago. She tossed them onto a velvet cloth and felt her pulse quicken as the rune for journey landed upside down. At first, she feared it meant disaster on her upcoming trip. But when she looked closer, she realized her life was the true journey. The work that awaited her was to trust her own instincts, instead of chasing someone else's map. The black mirror, or scrying bowl, depending on whom you ask, carries a different kind of pull. In Victorian salons, well-to-do mediums worshipped its depth, dipping their fingertips in oil to polish the surface until it swallowed every candle flame. Through its glossy blackness, some claimed to glimpse spirits or distant events. Lady Eleanor, a medium from Kent, once described how during one séance the mirror rippled like water under her touch, revealing a face not her own. A woman in mourning clutching a letter bound in crimson ribbon. That vision led Eleanor to uncover a long-buried family secret, her own grandmother's unspoken grief. When you gaze into the black mirror, you're not merely seeking psychic images. You're inviting the unconscious to surface its ghost stories, your earliest heartbreaks, your unwritten dreams, the wounds that still ache in silent corners of your mind. Tarot cards are perhaps the most familiar, or at least the most theatrical. Their painted symbols trace back to Italian courts of the 15th century, where nobles used them for games before occultists reimagined them as keys to esoteric wisdom. Today's Rider-Waite deck, with its rich imagery of swords, cups, wands, and pentacles, is practically a cultural icon. But these cards weren't designed for entertainment. They were crafted as a tapestry of mythic archetypes, each image a doorway to universal themes. The fool's leap of faith, the magician's raw power, the world's completion. I remember sitting across from Zara, an up-and-coming artist in Brooklyn, who summoned the 10 of Pentacles before her first gallery show. The card's image, a family gathered beneath a stone arch, seemed at odds with her avant-garde style. Yet Zara recognized her own longing in that scene, the quiet hope for lasting recognition, a place in something bigger than herself. Armed with that insight, she reworked her installation, invited her grandmother's photograph into the exhibit, and watched as her opening night filled not just with critics, but with the warmth of shared history. What unites these tools is less obvious than their differences. Each asks you to do 2 things, to let go of rigid logic, and to listen closely to the stirrings that arise when you do. Think of them as 3 musical instruments tuned to the same hidden frequency. The runes play a steady primal beat, the heartbeat of ancestral wisdom. The black mirror hums with a deep resonant drone, the echo of the collective unconscious. Tarot cards strike a rich chord progression, a narrative of human experience spanning birth, death, and rebirth. Choosing your tool is like choosing an instrument for self-exploration. If you crave stark clarity, a simple binary yes or no that still carries layers of meaning, runes might call to you. If you yearn to dive into the murky depths of your psyche, to watch emotions and memories swirl like oil on water, the black mirror will pull you in. If you're drawn to stories, mythic arcs, and a gallery of characters who mirror your own inner cast, a tarot deck will feel like home in your hands. But the true power doesn't lie in the stones, the glass, or the cardstock. It lives in the spark that flies between you and the symbol. That spark can illuminate a blind spot, reveal a buried truth, or ignite the courage to take a next step you'd never dared consider. Still, don't mistake drama for depth. In the wrong hands, these tools can become mere party tricks, or worse, crutches for indecision. The secret of mastery is simple yet profound. Approach your oracle with intention, humility, and a willingness to face whatever reflection emerges. Treat your readings not as verdicts but as invitations, to question, to feel, to grow. So which ancient voice whispers most clearly in your ear? Will you feel the echo of Odin's sacrifice in the scratch of runes? Will you hear the silent lament of your own shadows in the mirror's depths? Or will you follow the fool's journey through gilded cards to a place you've never known? In our next chapter, we'll step into the modern world of everyday prophecies, where ancient oracles find a home in mourning, rituals, and real-life decisions. We'll meet the graphic designer who turned a daily rune drawer into a week of breakthroughs, and the teacher who used tarot to rebuild her confidence after burnout. The oracle you choose isn't just a relic. It's a companion on life's winding path. Prepare to see how divination's oldest voices can guide the most ordinary moments of your day. When my client Julia landed an unexpected job offer from a tech startup, her heart leapt and her mind froze. She'd spent years in a stable role at a non-profit, the work she loved, but the paycheck that barely covered rent. When the startup came calling, everything inside her screamed yes, but something quieter, a whisper she couldn't name, held her back. That's when she reached for the deck I'd given her. A simple 3-card spread laid out on her kitchen table, morning light filtering through a cracked window. She didn't dress up the ritual with candles or incantations. She poured herself a cup of tea, took a breath, and let the cards fall where they would. The first card was the moon, shadows intertwined with light, the unknown lurking just beneath the surface. Julia felt a jolt. She realized she'd focused so intently on the offer's salary bump that she'd neglected the startup's culture. Fast-paced, chaotic, uncertain. The moon wasn't a warning of doom. It was a nudge to look closer, to trust the unease rising in her chest. The second card was the 2 of Pentacles, 2 coins dancing in mid-air, balanced precariously. At first, she read it as a challenge to juggle both roles, maybe negotiate a part-time arrangement. But her first instinct, the one that sat at the back of her mind, told her something else. She was already juggling so much that adding more might break her equilibrium. The card reflected her life, not the company's offer. The third card was the Empress, luxuriant, abundant, grounded in her own power. Suddenly Julia saw beyond the spreadsheets and the stock options. She pictured herself creating meaningful campaigns at the non-profit, mentoring new team members, using her voice to uplift marginalized communities. The Empress wasn't about comfort, but about flourishing where her roots were already sinking deep. In that moment, the spread didn't deliver a prophecy, it held up a mirror. It showed her that her real question wasn't, should I take this job, but where will I grow most fully? And growth, she realized, wasn't measured in paychecks. It was measured in purpose, community, and the quiet satisfaction of doing work that mattered. Over the next week, Julia reframed every conversation. When friends asked why she passed on a 6-figure salary, she didn't need to disguise regret. She spoke of opportunity cost, the things she valued more than money. By the time the startup called back to renegotiate, she knew her answer would be no, and she delivered it with calm certainty. Within months, the non-profit launched a new initiative under her leadership, and Julia felt that same spark she'd chased in the tarot spread. Creative abundance grounded in conviction. Julia's story isn't an outlier. Across cultures and careers, people are weaving these quiet rituals into their daily lives. A swift 3-card draw before a tough conversation, a single rune tossed onto the desk before drafting an important email, A glance into a pocket mirror before stepping onto a stage. Why does it work? Because these tools don't tell you what to do. They illuminate the hidden forces already shaping your choices. They sharpen your attention to gut feelings you'd otherwise dismiss. When you catch that flicker of doubt or that rush of excitement, you can pause, ask, "What's this really about?" and then act from clarity instead of anxiety. But there are pitfalls. I've seen clients become addicted to readings, searching for the right card rather than trusting their own judgment. Others read symbols as absolutes, ignoring the nuance of context, and some try to bend the outcome. They pull another card until they like the message, turning divination into superstition rather than insight. The remedy is simple. Treat these rituals like a conversation, not a vending machine. You ask the question, the symbols respond in their mysterious language, and you, the seeker, hold responsibility for interpretation. If a card or rune brings trouble, don't run from it, lean in. Rarely is the message literal. The Two of Pentacles might mean you can't juggle 2 jobs today, but it might also nudge you to balance work and self-care more mindfully. When used with respect, these ancient oracles become more than divination tools. They become daily companions on the path of self-discovery. They help you recognize patterns, burnout before it flares, self-sabotage before it derails, creativity before it withers. Julia didn't walk away from a job offer because a card forbade it. She walked toward a life she'd glimpsed through symbol and story, a life that felt more authentically hers. And every morning when she brews her tea and lays down the cards, she's not predicting the day. She's stepping into it with eyes wide open to the mysteries waiting to unfold. Here's the truth no one tells you. Once you start listening to these ancient whispers, you can't unhear them. Remember Marisol, standing before that cratered altar, and Julia tracing tarot images on her kitchen table. Their journeys both end at the same crossroads we all face, the moment when insight becomes action. Will you dare to listen when the universe speaks? And more importantly, will you trust what you hear? When Marisol finally decoded the sigils in that oil's fractal glow, she realized the prophecy wasn't some grand destiny handed down by unseen gods. It was an invitation to step into her own power. When Julia passed on the high-paying offer, she didn't walk away from opportunity, she walked toward purpose. In both cases, the oracles didn't dictate their choices. They reflected the truths those seekers needed to claim. Now it's your turn. Tonight, before you fall asleep, find a quiet corner, light a candle, or simply settle under a lamp's soft glow. Take 3 deep breaths and ask whatever question presses most urgently on your mind, no matter how small or mundane it seems. Then choose your tool. Toss a handful of runes, draw 3 tarot cards, or simply stare into a small mirror held in your palm. Listen without judgment as the symbols stir something inside you. You might feel a tingle of recognition when a card's image echoes an old memory, or a flutter of surprise when a rune's shape reminds you of a dream you once had. Don't rush to label the message as good or bad. Let it wash over you until something clicks, a phrase, a feeling, a spark of clarity. That spark is your signal, an opening into a deeper conversation with yourself. Write down whatever comes. No need for fancy language, just the raw first thoughts that rise. In the morning, revisit those words. You'll find they're more than coincidences. They're clues to the patterns guiding your life. But be warned, the path of divination can be as unsettling as it is illuminating. The universe's voice often speaks in riddles, and the symbols you draw may challenge you to confront fears you've long ignored. You might uncover a habit that's draining your energy, or a dream that's calling you so loudly you can no longer dismiss it. That's the power and the danger of listening too well. Yet every seeker who's walked this path will tell you the same thing. The discomfort of truth pales next to the regret of ignoring it. The real magic isn't in predicting what will happen. It's in awakening to what already is. Those buried impulses, unspoken longings, and hidden strengths that shape every choice you make. So here's your challenge. After tonight's reading, share one insight in the comments below. It doesn't have to be profound, just honest. Maybe you discover you've been avoiding a tough conversation. Maybe you realize a long-forgotten passion is nudging you back to the drawing board. Whatever it is, speak it aloud. You'll be amazed how words once voiced take on their own momentum. And remember, these rituals are not magic spells but mirrors. They reflect your own inner currents waiting to be named, understood, and acted upon. When you honor that reflection, when you trust it enough to make the first move, you begin to co-create your story with the universe itself. Will you dare to listen? Will you dare to act? The choice, as always, is yours. The oracle has spoken. Now it's up to you to answer.